Hi everyone, my name is Palfrey, and today I'm going to be talking about Apple's expansion of the iPhone production in India and how that connects to international business strategy. And this is actually a really good example of how companies adjust when the global environment is changing. So this topic comes from a recent Bloomberg article that highlights how quickly Apple is increasing production in India. In just 1 year, production grew by over 50%, and now about a quarter of all iPhones are being made there. That is a major shift for a company that has mostly relied pretty heavily on China, and what makes this interesting is that it isn't just about growth, it's about why that growth is happening. Apple is reacting to external pressures like tariffs and geopolitical tensions, which Reuters also talks about. For example, the US and China have had ongoing trade tensions, including tariffs on certain goods, which can make it more expensive for companies to produce in China and sell internationally. And there have been concerns about the supply chain and political uncertainty, which makes it riskier to rely on one country too heavily. So overall, this isn't just expansion, but it's a strategic response. So if we look at the actual numbers, the change is pretty dramatic. Apple went from producing 36 million iPhones in India to about 55 million in just 1 year. And this tells us that India is no longer just a secondary location and that it's becoming more of a core part of Apple's global supply chain. This kind of shift doesn't just happen overnight. It usually takes years and years of planning and investment and coordination with suppliers. So the speed of this change really shows how important the move is for Apple. And at the same time, Apple is spreading out its production across different countries. This helps the company avoid being too dependent on one location, which is something a lot of global firms are trying to do right now. So how did Apple actually expand into India? So they didn't just go in and build everything themselves, obviously. Instead, they used contract manufacturing and worked with companies that were already established there, like Foxconn and Tata, and that allowed them to increase production a lot faster than if they just started from scratch. It also means that they can adjust a lot easier if demand changes or conditions shift. So instead of just committing to one fixed setup, they can keep things a little bit more flexible. So why India specifically? There are a few important reasons. First of all, India has a large and growing workforce, which is very important for manufacturing at this scale. And second of all, the government has been encouraging companies to produce there through financial incentives, like programs that reward companies for increasing local manufacturing. But the biggest factor is strategic positioning. So India gives Apple another major location to operate from, which helps them stay more stable if something were to go wrong in another country. So this move is a lot about creating balance and not just maximizing efficiency. So this connects directly to what we've been learning in class. One idea is that companies have to balance efficiency with flexibility. And companies have always considered costs when making decisions, obviously, but they also have to account for uncertainty in the global environment because everything can always be uncertain. What's changing now is how much emphasis is being placed on managing that uncertainty, and Apple is doing exactly that by spreading production across multiple locations. This reduces risk and makes the company a lot more equipped to be able to adapt. So the impact of this shift is very significant, as I said, and it changes how Apple operates on a global scale. One impact is that Apple can ramp up production much faster during peak demand, and such as when new iPhones are released. And it also puts Apple in a very stronger position when working with manufacturers, since it has a lot more options to choose from. At the same time, expanding production in India helps Apple build relationships in a market that is expected to keep growing a lot. So overall, this move supports both Apple's production goals and its long-term business expansion. So to wrap it up, Apple's expansion into India shows how global companies are constantly adjusting to new challenges. India is becoming an increasingly important manufacturing hub, and this example shows how companies can apply international business strategies in real-world situations. It also highlights how businesses have to stay flexible and adapt to a changing global environment, as there will always be uncertainties. Thank you for watching.